So we are going on to part 2. See if we can do this today. So the book is broken up into sections, right? So we've done through the first section, which was the Beatitudes, Matthew chapter 5, 1 through 12. And so now we're moving on to part 2, which is the next several verses, 13 through 20. We're going to talk about Christians and culture. So there are some very interesting chapters, some very interesting discussions in here. Lots of things to think about. And again, just like the title of this book, they're very challenging, right? Every time I still see this title, what if Jesus was serious? I think, man, what if he was serious? What am I overlooking in my own life that I should be focused on when I'm not? So we're going to start by actually reading these verses, Matthew chapter 5, 13 through 20. Would you care to read that?
I can do it.
That would be great.
Okay. 13 through 20. You are the salt of the earth, but if the salt loses its saltiness, how can it be made salty again? It is no longer good for anything except to be thrown out and trampled by men. You are the light of the world. A city on a hill cannot be hidden. Neither do people light a lamp and put it under a bowl. Instead, they put it on its stand, and it gives light to everyone in the house. In the same way, let your light shine before men, that they may see your good deeds and praise your Father in heaven. Do not think that I have come to abolish the law or the prophets. I have not come to abolish them, but to fulfill them. I tell you the truth, until heaven and earth disappear, not the smallest letter, not the least stroke of a pen will by any means disappear from the law until everything is accomplished. Anyone who breaks one of the least of these commandments and teaches others to do the same will be called least in the kingdom of heaven. But whoever practices and teaches these commands will be called great in the kingdom of heaven. For I tell you that unless your righteousness surpasses that of the Pharisees and the teachers of the law, you will certainly not enter the kingdom of heaven.
Great, thank you. So as we roll from Beatitudes into this next section, what comes to mind? What are your thoughts about this? Anything strike you just right off the bat from hearing this or reading this?
Everybody makes a difference, whether you realize it or not.
Say that again.
Everybody makes a difference, whether you realize it or not.
Everybody makes a difference. Everything you do makes a difference, whether you... That is frightening, right? That's right. We actually have some great quotes that go right along with that. So that's a great point. We are on stage as Christians, right? I mean, if we weren't before social media era, we definitely are now. We've talked about this, right? People watch Christians. You know, sometimes they watch us just to see where they can find the chinks in the armor, right? And poke at us. Sometimes they watch us to see if we're good examples. Sometimes they watch us to see if we'll do something different than the world, because maybe they're tired of what the world is doing to them personally. And so they want to see what Christians can do for them.
Whether you mean to be or not, you're on the stage. And whether you're a good actor or a bad actor, you're on stage.
Exactly.
Yes, ma'am.
My version says in verse 19, mine says, therefore, whoever relaxes one of the least of these commandments teaches others to do the same, what we call the least of them. I don't know if yours says relaxes.
No, mine says breaks.
Or sets aside is what I have. Yeah.
Well, that word really struck me when I was following along, because I think sometimes we think that when people completely do away with something, well, that's really wrong and that's really terrible. But he's not saying that. He's saying even if you just relax it, if you just
change,
dumb it down, water it down,
Yeah.
if you want to say it, that's not the right thing to do.
Exactly right. Being a little more maybe lenient because we're tired or frustrated or different situational things. Right. Yeah. Relaxes is a good way to look at that. I like that translation. So one of the quotes that we're going to talk about, we have several salt and light quotes. This is from John Stott. We should not ask what is wrong with the world, for that diagnosis has already been given. We already know. Rather, we should ask what has happened to the salt and light. So that one kind of gives me a little, chills on my neck, right? Because we already know what's wrong with the world. This is a great point. But what has happened to the salt and light? Back to us being an example on the world stage now. How does the culture view Christianity, right? This whole section is about Christians and culture, and this is a great thing to think about.
So You know, last week we talked a little about, or maybe it was the last couple of weeks, about how much the world has changed. Well, what if that changes because the Christians have been less salty and less lighty? Is that the right word?
I think lighting's right.
Right. What happens if that's the real reason the world has changed the way it is because we are not being what we expect it to be. And that's a scary thought.
Right. Our second quote goes along with that. In a tasteless and dark world, let us be salt and light. And I like this one because this really talks about, you know, the current state of the world, right? In a tasteless and dark world. How many times have we seen things posted or had conversations like, that's pretty tasteless. We shouldn't be, this whole thing needs a little salt and a little bit of light. But this falls to us, just like these verses, right? We are the salt, we are the light.
Do you think of yourself as salt and light on a daily basis?
I see a head going,
You try.
okay. Okay,
I think if we did, we'd all do better.
Yeah.
okay. I think if we did, we'd all do better. I like that, right? So I,
Just kind of, you know, just go along, you just go along, and you lose focus, and you just like, you know, I think.
right. We've relaxed a little.
You relax, your mindset ignore,
Mhm.
you know, if you can't post,
Right,
it's too easy to post.
exactly. Yeah, salt and light is important, right? But it requires effort and it requires intentionality.
I like Judy's translation there, relax. Because I mean, there's times I think that we really realize, oh man, this is a very dark situation. So we come in and we make a point to be light in that situation. But then there's others that we go and we, you know, oh, relax.
Right.
And again, we're going to make a difference one way or the other.
That's right.
We're making a difference.
Yeah, we're going to influence one way or the other. One way or the other.
And I wonder how many times around, let's say I'm around you two guys, do I relax? Because, no.
It's just Aaron and Terry.
Your life, so I can just kind of relax and get all relax.
Right.
That's when it gets dangerous.
Right. I have a couple more quotes. So check this one out. Salt stops corruption and decay. Salt stimulates thirst. Jesus calls us salt. Are we showing his light to a dying world? Is anyone thirsty for Christ because of our words? That last sentence, right? Is anyone thirsty for Christ because of our words? Because we are salt. I think it goes to Nita's point. Are we doing it? Are we generating a thirst for Christ because of who we are? There's a lot in this salt and light.
I think it goes back to the sermon last week, talking about the Spirit. Salt plays a positive, it all both, you know, stops corruption and decay. That's positive. It like, you know, it adds flavor to food. All of that's positive. But yet, how many of us as believers, we've done the exact opposite? Instead of making somebody thirsty for Christ, we've turned them off from Christ.
Right. Exactly. Yep. Sometimes we do that,
Yes.
unfortunately. Here's another one from Charles Spurgeon. The Bible is not the light of the world, it is the light of the church. But the world does not read the Bible, the world reads Christians. You are the light of the world.
Yeah, that's a different look on it, right? Because the world is not reading this book, but they are reading us.
Right. I don't know what age Charles Spurgeon was when he wrote this, but I mean, this was a while ago.
Yeah.
Right? This wasn't recent. This wasn't in the past 10 years. Hasn't been since the invention of, you know, Twitter and Facebook.
That's right.
The world reads Christians. They pay attention to us. That's one thing I want us to be sensitized to when we leave here, is that we are being watched. Not in like a creepy way, but right. But they're paying attention to us, right?
I know that whenever something bad or if someone is worried or I love that, they always come to me.
And that means that you're being salt and light, right? They recognize, they go toward the light, right? Because they're thirsty for what you have to offer, for what Christ has to offer through you.
Yeah. Can we be that person that people come to?
Right,
And it takes time.
right.
It takes consistency,
Intentionality.
intentionality.
You can't relax. Okay, a couple more. This is the bigger picture. It is only through the Spirit that we can be salt and light, and that is the witness of God to the world. This doesn't always depend on us, right? On our effort. It is through the Spirit that we're transformed, through the Spirit that we have the strength that we need, and the conviction and the intentionality. Okay, last one. Always have a unique character like salt. Its presence is not felt, but its absence makes everything tasteless. That one caught my attention also, right? The absence of salt makes it tasteless. How many dishes do you have, things that you prepare with salt? Like, man, this would be terrible without salt. You know, have you ever had some French fries from some places that didn't have salt on them? Right? So, but the absence makes it tasteless. We should want people to thirst for Christ through us. We should make them thirsty.
But so often as Christians, we seem to be, our goal is to make sure we're seen and heard and felt in society. Right? And that's not really salt in a more abrupt way, maybe I should say.
Right.
Right?
More dramatic way.
More dramatic way. That's right. Can we be that salt, that seasoning that's really missed when we're not there, speaking in love and kindness and patience, that they notice the difference.
Right. And that ties into our next slide, right? This isn't just about drawing attention to us personally, right? This isn't about like a personal mission. The title of this chapter, the theme of this chapter, chapter 11, is if Jesus was serious, then we would value an ordinary life more than a famous one. And we're going to talk about that a little bit, makes sense what we're talking about. But this isn't about us. It's not about us being the center of attention when these things occur in our lives or in other people's lives. This is about living an ordinary life.
Yeah, and I think it ties into what Anita said right away. I mean, this is about all of us, right? Jesus in the sermon was addressing the multitudes, the crowds, the average and the ordinary person. You know, that's who he was telling to be the salt and the light, not just the priests, the ministers, those out being the missionaries. He was telling it to everybody.
Yeah, and if you look at the pyramid, I don't know if you can read this. What's that?
I'm sorry?
Why is this thing?
We'll get there.
We're going to get there. If you, I don't know if you can read the triangle, right? But so the biggest section on the bottom is the unwashed masses. This is the crowd that Jesus was speaking to. Part of them, the biggest part was the unwashed masses. Right above that was the middle class. Right above that were the elites. And right above that was the 1%. So everyone was in that crowd. The average and ordinary person all the way up to the top.
Should we address Illinois?
I think we should.
I know that caught their attention.
It did.
Are we against Illinois?
Not in this lesson.
No, not in this case. So I guess one of the interesting things here, and we'll start one step back, but he didn't call us to be like salt and like light. He called us to actually be salt and light. I think that there's a small difference there. And then he said, you are the salt of the, not Peoria, not Germantown Hills, not Pekin, not Illinois, not the US, but the salt of the world. And I think that's one of the things that, you know, sometimes we're like, well, I can only influence a small area. But he's calling us to be something much bigger than I think sometimes we either understand or give ourselves credit for. He's expecting us to be the salt and the light of the world. That's a big responsibility, but yet it starts very simply.
And that kind of ties into a lot of other things we know, right? Like being like-minded. You know, how are we supposed to influence the earth or the world, be salt of the earth, the light of the world, if we're not all like-minded as Christians? Right? Like-mindedness doesn't mean the same, right? But it means like-minded, same purpose, same intent. This is a big assignment, like you said.
Yeah. So how can we have a bigger view of just being salt and light in our little neck of the woods, our little library, or our little job, or our little community? How can we take that on as a bigger responsibility?
Okay, they're quiet again.
They are quiet again.
I was just sitting there thinking of the outreach that we've done to the Filipino teachers that have come over here. Not that we do it for any recognition, but I can't help but imagine that when they are communicating with their family back in the Philippines, they aren't saying, there's this group that has helped us so much. You know, that's where that one little act is really impacting a world type of situation.
Right.
Absolutely.
Yeah, that's a great example, right? So we've influenced just by trying to take care of people, by trying to be salt and light to one person, starting at one person, then now we've influenced who knows how many, right? Because their families know about it, and their families' families know about it, and their friends know about it, that, man, these Christians, they've been really good to us. They've been really helpful.
Hopefully there's a church over there that will inspire their
That's right.
start attending.
That's right. And if nothing else, you know, it drives the conversation of why are they doing that? Of, wow, somebody went out of their way to show kindness. You know, am I doing that? I mean, hopefully some of these acts, you know, drive a bigger thought, a bigger mentality. But how can we begin to touch, you know, bigger people? And it does start small, but it doesn't stay there if we've done it right.
Because we believe Jesus was serious.
Because we believe Jesus was serious.
You know, the person right in front of us, and like you were saying about the teachers, started with them getting right in front of us. Instead of thinking the world,
Right.
we're thinking about the people that are right in front of you. And God, Jesus is the one that, you know, takes it and multiplies
That's
the
right.
things that we do. And when we were talking a moment ago, Terry, about, I think it was you or Aaron, I'm not sure which one was talking about, that it's not the priest or the, you know, I just got to read the book of Amos. I mean, it's a sycamore fig tree farmer.
Right.
You know, I mean, he didn't come from a priestly family, he wasn't a prophet or anything like that. But for that short period of time, God called him just an ordinary person to speak. And he was from the southern kingdom speaking to the northern kingdom. But he did it. He was faithful to what God had given him at the moment. And I believe that's what he's wanting from us, just be faithful. I don't know how many times I've done nothing because I thought, wow, it's too big.
Right.
So you don't do anything.
Right. So that's the transition to our next point, right? Because this can feel like a big assignment, right? Salt of the earth, light of the world. Man, how do I do this? Well, obviously, number one, it's not just us, right? It's just not by my power. But it's also, he's just affirming the world-shaping value of ordinary people who follow the ways of an extraordinary God. It's ordinary people, right? It's a fig tree farmer. It's, you know, fishermen. It's just ordinary people, unwashed masses. You know, I'm kind of in the unwashed masses some points in my life. Yeah, not today. But it's ordinary people. Right? So this isn't just an overwhelming assignment. This isn't just a huge burden that we can't bear, because he wants to use ordinary people for extraordinary purposes.
Yeah. And do we qualify as ordinary people? I hope so. Yeah. Let us be the ordinary. Let God do the extraordinary. But we've got to be there.
That's the key. Ordinary, let God be the extraordinary. God supplies whatever need, whatever. He's just looking for us to be available,
Right.
and be faithful, and he's going to supply the power and the might.
And the words sometimes. How many times do we maybe not engage in a situation because we don't think we'll have the words, right? And sometimes it doesn't require words, just like we know. Sometimes it just requires presence, availability, being intentional. We don't necessarily have to be ambitious Christians, right? That's part of what ties this back to, value an ordinary life, not a famous one. This isn't about me and what I can do and being ambitious and being, pick another word, famous or popular or, have tons of followers. That's not what this is about. This is about ordinary lives, right? That live in rich communion with God. And you had a quote here from reference for scripture for Thessalonians.
Yeah, 1 Thessalonians 4:11 and 12. Make it your ambition to can't even read here. Make it your ambition to lead a quiet life, to mind your own business and to work with your hands, just as we told you, so that your daily life may win the respect of outsiders and so that you will not be dependent on anybody. But how often is it that daily, quiet, consistent life, in the ordinary things that we really begin to have the biggest impact on people? And, one of the biggest things I took out of Experiencing God by Henry Blackaby, if anybody has done that, is the fact that God is always or already ahead of us and working in a situation. And it's up to us to join him in what he's already doing. And it's hard for us to see at times, but a lot of times in the ordinary days or the ordinary just life, he leads us to something and it's up to us just to be there, to open our mouth sometimes or to lend a helping hand. He's already there prepping whatever it is, but are we going to join him in what he's doing?
And they're in verse 12. I'm sorry, go ahead.
Well, I was just thinking with the First Thessalonians, if you think about salt, it's not making a lot of noise in your food.
Exactly.
When it's not there, but when it's there, you don't really go, and thinking about light encroaching on darkness. We know when it's not there, but again, when he's in the building, we didn't go, whoa, look at the lights. It's not making a lot. And I think that's what he's talking about is, hey, we're making this difference. We don't have to make a big bang about it.
That's right.
Right.
So
Exactly.
if salt was more like pop rock candy, then we would know it's there, right? You could hear it. But that's not what he's calling us to be.
And I think that's important for the culture we're living in right now, pandemic and all the political things that go with so much of all of that. You're getting a tug both ways that, you need to be more vocal, and more, both ways.
Right, exactly. There's a couple sentences from this chapter that stood out and makes our point. It isn't that God expects each person to change the world through remarkable accomplishments. That's not what he expects. Rather, Jesus expects his undistinguished followers to be the source of the world's most essential ingredients. That's it. Not to be remarkable, not to stand out, not to be pop rocks, right? It doesn't say pop rocks. It says salt and light, right? That you notice when they're gone more than when they're there.
I think there's a lot of power in metaphors that escapes us because salt's not precious to us by that bag. And I mean, honestly, when you remember the last time you were in the dark?
Yeah.
That it wasn't your bedroom, you turned the lights off. Like you found yourself in a dark place. There's lights everywhere. So this metaphor,
Yeah.
we don't live in the first century where wow, look, there's a fire. Let's go to the fire.
Exactly.
Yeah.
It's warm, it's safe.
Right.
We're let's turn the lights on. It's not a big deal.
Right.
But
Right.
if you could turn the lights off in this room, I guarantee you, and seal up the windows, in about 3 minutes, there's going to be some people really uncomfortable in this dark room.
Right.
You
Exactly.
know?
Exactly.
And if you were to turn, if you had a lighter, and turn that lighter on, we would be drawn to the light.
That's right.
After a certain amount of time, because it's maybe everybody has a threshold, but
Exactly. Yeah. I mean, we forget refrigeration didn't exist. The preservatives didn't exist. Salt was critical to their food source. They couldn't run always down to the local grocery store or to expect their canning and frozen food to be there in a month. It's just not the way it works.
You had a quote here.
One more quote, yep, from Dietrich Bonhoeffer. In ordinary life, we hardly realize that we receive a great deal more than we give, and it is only with gratitude that life becomes rich. The first part of this, we hardly realize that we receive a great deal more than we give in ordinary life. And that's where we are in and every day. So if we don't take advantage of that, we're missing out on so much.
Well, I think it goes to Alan's point a little bit, right? Salt and light have become ordinary. We kind of take them for granted, right? But we miss them when they're not there. So this all ties to, hey, ordinary life is not a bad thing. It doesn't have to be remarkable and famous and have 1 million followers and, you know, all this stuff. Like, man, I'm not a standout Christian, right? I don't need to have a great list of accomplishments of things that I've done to make myself feel better, right? God knows what we've done. God just puts us in situations. I love compassion, right? It's kind of the etymology of the word compassion just means to sit, right? Sit and suffer with the person, show compassion. Sometimes it doesn't require words, like we've said several times in the past few weeks. It's just an ordinary life. And make it an ambition to lead a quiet life. Mind your own business. That's pretty clear. We don't need to stand out to do great things for his kingdom. Ordinary people for an extraordinary God.
Give me a bumper sticker.
I think we should.
So we go from being told to be the light of the world to looking at a comparison of what we do in public versus private, because later he's going to make sure that we're careful that we're doing some things in private because of something very specific.
And so if Jesus was serious, we will seek God's glory more than our own. This kind of dovetails into what we've just been talking about. Is this about us or is this about God? Is this about me being remarkable, extraordinary, famous, popular Christian? Or is this about God's glory and what I can do? And I love the graph here, right? You know, God looks good versus I look good, benefits me versus benefiting others. Many times are we trying to balance that, you know, am I saying a great prayer because I really want people to think I said a great prayer and have people come up and tell me what a great prayer it was and ask me for advice on how to pray, and after we come to their events and pray for them. No, is this about God or is this about me? And that's what we're going to start talking about. I don't know if we'll get all the way through it today. But.
That's right. But it starts with, right, you are the light of the world. You are salt. It makes it sound like it's about us. And a lot of times we have seen where it's about us. And then how do we balance that public versus private piece? What is our intent? The importance of our intent is so critical.
And so what is our intent? Is our intent for us to look good or is our intent for God to be glorified?
Yeah.
You got a couple of questions here to get us thinking about that. Like, why do we fast? Why do we pray in public? Is it for God's glory or is it for ours? Do I want to check mark on the gold star, right, on my personal record? Or do I want somebody to know that this was about God?
That's right. So I got some what if questions. Are we ready for those?
I am ready.
Okay, you are. What if we posted our giving records every quarter for everybody to see? What if we posted our attendance records for each family? What if we posted how much time you spent fasting? Would that change what you do? If we posted the giving records for each person, would that change how you give? Because it's visible and somebody could say, uh-oh, Terry didn't give anything this last quarter.
Someone's going to come talk to me about it.
Yeah.
That's a great line of thinking, right? So would I change because I know someone is watching? Is essentially the question. Would my behavior change because I know someone would be paying attention? Because I know it'd be right at the back of the auditorium and people are going to go down the list and look and compare.
Who's in the top five?
Like, who's in the top five?
That's
like,
right.
Oh man, the Campbells, they were up there. I got to get in the top five now, right? Does it change because it's public? What do you think of that concept?
Besides scary.
That's worrying about the innocent God.
It is.
Mhm.
But when you think, well, what would be your first reaction if a church said they were going to do that? Would you give differently?
Hold it up.
Yeah, that's right. Or how much time we spent reading the Bible every day.
That's
How
right.
much time we spent praying.
That's right. If we had an easy way to track it, then it would
Mhm.
automatically post to a board that keeps changing.
How many of the class videos you've watched over the
Oh,
whole
yes,
past
that-
year and a half? Yeah, your check marks.
I don't want to need a set though, because it's a big post, you know, I may give $1,000 in a month, but somebody else may only give, you know, $50 a month, but I may have the ability to do that. I may have the ability to do a lot more than that, where they gave more based on where they are in their life.
That's right.
So when we post that publicly, you know, it's just, it's bringing it down to it's about us, it's not really about God.
That's right.
Giving is us giving to God, not giving to each other.
That's right.
And so, you know, the person that gave the least may be the one who truly gave the most based on where they are in their life. So, you know, as humans, we're not gonna look at that the way God.
Right.
And sometimes it's not even how much you give, it's what's on your heart when you give. You know, he's saying, are they truly giving it because they want to? And they love me, or are they giving it because they have to keep up with somebody else?
Right.
So that's the other aspect of it.
Absolutely.
Importance of that.
And that could lead into a whole conversation about judging others and,
Oh, sure does. Sure
wow,
does.
sure does.
Yeah, so the items, if you're going to do anything for the show of it, right, to be about you, that's when we need to make sure that it's private. If we can truly do something for the glory of God, that's when we should be set on a hill and to be the light.
You know, as a preacher, to as teachers, I mean, it's hard. People have expectations, and, you know, we need prayers, that we're doing it for the glory of God, and this is for God, and it's not for me or you or somebody else to receive some kind of accolades, because wow, man, you're good, you know, you guys are good teachers or whatever, you know, I mean, you know, this could be a very dangerous setting if we're not careful.
Exactly.
Absolutely.
Exactly.
For any of us.
Yep.
And you can see examples of that throughout the world. I mean, quickly, this power goes to people's heads. And for why it's done. Sorry, go ahead.
No, that's a great point. And I want to leave us with one thing. We just got a couple minutes here. So if we look at Matthew 6:1, I think really we're going to round this out probably next week. But Matthew 6:1 reads, "Be careful not to practice your righteousness in front of others to be seen by them. If you do, you will have no reward from your Father in heaven." Let me read that first part again, that first sentence. Be careful not to practice your righteousness in front of others. We could stop there, right? To be seen by them is the second half of that. I think that it doesn't mean that they can't see our righteousness, that we can't demonstrate that we're salt and light. But if we're doing it just to be seen by them, then that's on us.
That's right.
Any comments or questions? I think we frightened them again.
I think
this
so.
week. Yeah.
Again, it's ordinary people doing extraordinary things through God, but we have to make sure our intent, when we are the salt and the light, what is our intent? If it's building us up, probably not good. If it's building up God and showing the way to God, be that light, be that salt. It's tricky.
I just want to say about all of us, when I say this could be a very dangerous setting, that doesn't mean, oh, so we should meet or something, you know, or, but we just need to help each other in making sure that our comments to one another is,
That's right.
is on the level that Jesus is calling us to.
Exactly.
But that doesn't mean don't tell David good sermon.
Or Aaron, good class.
So,
Mhm,
That's
mhm,
right. That doesn't mean that we don't have to give compliments
Mhm.
and that we don't try to do our best. Again, you can quickly go down this spiral of, well then, okay,
Why do anything?
yeah. But it's what is the intent of what we're doing in our ordinary life? And who are we watching? Who are we trying to seek the glory from?
Okay, thanks for your time. Enjoy your day. Stop recording.